Welcome to this book review of the Woodpecker Method. Most of you will be familiar with the Woodpecker Method for Tactics, the first book, where you have a set of puzzles. You do them over a couple of weeks, and then you accelerate the review cycles until you can do them in one day. And the idea is by following that process that you ingrain the patterns that are in the puzzles in your play. So this is about positional play, and Axel Smith worked for 5 years on this book, and of course positional play is very different. Once again, the positions have been taken from World Championship games, and in total there are 1000 exercises, and the first 545 puzzles have a common theme, and that is that the maneuvers that you have to find are related to common pawn structures. So the first 545 exercises teach you how to play given a certain pawn structure and what the positional maneuvers are related to the pawn structures. And then there are another roughly 500 exercises where you practice positional play, and they are related to positional rules of thumb. So place your rooks on open files, don't move your pawns in front of your king, and so on. Of course, some of these elements are still related to the pawn structure. So in total 1000 exercises, you do them over a couple of weeks, and then you accelerate in 7 review cycles. And the idea is that by osmosis you learn the positional maneuvers and you relate them to pawn structures, and you learn the positional rules of thumb. So 5 years of work, and it has been tested in detail. That's what you can expect from a quality company like Quality Chess. Jacob Aagaard looked at every position. He had a couple of beta testers for all the positions. So the quality of the book is in that sense guaranteed. Now the question is, how do you learn? And I'd like to switch to another book, which is kind of a standard, which is Chess Structures, a Grandmaster Guide by Mauricio Flores Rios. Right? And in this book, the author gives a formation, a certain position, and then explains the white plans, the black plans, and then discusses outposts, which structures can occur from the initial pawn structure, and then has model games and where there's a learning objective, and at the end of the game there are final remarks related to the model game. So this is the way it is set up in this book, Chess Structures, and it's very different from the Woodpecker Method. So let's have a look at the pre-om exercises. So these are the exercises that are related to the pawn structure. So positional maneuvers related to the pawn structure. And you can see all positions are from World Championships games. And so this is the first one, right? And in this position, the idea is that white plays g4. So let me show you the solution, right? g4, launching an attack, and Steinitz played short castle. And the idea is that you learn to play g4. So let me go just to a few more examples. So in this example, right, you can see the pawn structure. There's a pawn on d4, e4, and f4. And the idea is that you advance the pawn to f5. So in this case, f5, increasing the scope of the f1 rook, e3 bishop and e2 knight. And after the next move, also the remaining pieces, d3, c3 and a1. It can be hardly better. So, and one more, right? So you see here the position, and white is to move. Again, a position from Steinitz. And you can see the idea is to play f5. Steinitz played knight e2. And what struck me, right, if you think about that these positions are all chosen to highlight play in a typical pawn structure, the solutions don't describe, let's say, this is the pawn structure and this is typical about the maneuver in this pawn structure. It's all very implicit. So there's no introduction to say, okay, this is the pawn structure that we're discussing at the moment. And even in the answers, it's not given that, okay, this is the pawn structure and this is why you have to play this maneuver in this pawn structure. The idea is that if you go through 1000 exercises and you do them over and over again, that by this process of osmosis, and it's quite implicit, that you learn these maneuvers and that you start to recognize in which positions they are relevant. What I like about this book, I think for your chess culture, it's great to look at those positions from world champions. I think the positions are doable, so most of the time, and when you look at positional chess, it's very hard for club players to find solutions and to do these exercises, but I have been doing a number of exercises with my students from this book, and it is manageable, so they are at a good level. The only thing I would like to say is that you have to think about how you learn. So if you believe in the Woodpecker Method, and if you specifically believe in the Woodpecker Method for positional play, then this is the book for you, right? If you, on the other hand, say, I prefer to have an introduction like in the book from Mauricio Flores Rios, where they start off with the pawn structure, then show me the plans, and then after the plans have been shown, I get a model game with a learning objective. This is the way I learn. Then I think this book is more suited for you. So overall, let's go back to the Woodpecker Method. Like I stated, over 1000 exercises, 500 related to pawn structure play, 500 related to positional rules of thumb, where the pawn structure, of course, still can play a role, all from World Championship games. They are doable, they are well tested. It has been over 5 years of work, so that makes it a good book and interesting, but you have to verify for yourself what your learning style is and whether this fits your learning style. And because the learning is quite implicit, because the pawn structures are not mentioned in the solutions explicitly, and it's also not the case that the puzzles are structured by pawn structure. No, the idea is that you just learn it by doing these puzzles. Thank you for your attention. I hope you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.